And with that, here we go. The not one, not two, the three-time Utah Sportscaster of the Year. And now, I want to make sure I get the title right. The Utah Athletics Director of Broadcasting, Bill Riley, good friend. We've been on your show many times. Now you get to come on this one with Y Option. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us here in week 5.
Yo, I'm happy to do it. You came on my radio show so many times. I feel like I owe you about a million of these, so I'm happy to do it. Good to see you.
It is great to see you. What is it like to be you now in this new role? You're still calling games on the weekends, of course, as the voice of the Utes, but the day-to-day radio show is no longer that. You got a day-to-day job. Give us an update on your life.
Well, I had a really good 30-year run in sports talk radio. So I figured I'd step out on a high note, knowing how mercurial our business can be. And really, what happened was with Utah moving to the Big 12 conference, the Big 12 doesn't have a network like the Pac 12 network was, like the Big 10 network, things like that. So what they have is every school has an ESPN Plus digital platform. So it houses a ton of the broadcasts that would have aired, say, on a Pac 12 network or something else. And Utah didn't have a position, and they were kind of creating this out of nothing. And I've had such a great relationship here for so many years with the University of Utah folks in my role. I always said I was kind of a member of the extended family, and they approached me with this, and I applied for the position. And it was just a really, really good fit. There are not many jobs I would have left the job I had for because I love talking on the radio every day. But this is fun because I still get to do the games, the football, the basketball, and I get to do some more games on ESPN Plus, soccer, some other things. But this is allowing me to help kind of create something that doesn't exist, a broadcast platform, a broadcast department, working with a lot of good folks that are already here in this department, joining their team. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's a lot of challenges. It's a new world for me, kind of like this is for you, but it's a lot of fun and I'm having a blast.
I like it. You're channeling the inner Michael Molinari, a listener of this, as you know well, now running
Yep.
things, the Pac-12 Enterprises. But you're giving back. That's what I hear when you say that. Like you're giving back. You're trying to create something in a new frontier for this university, especially in athletics. Do you feel that? And what is that like? Because you used to feel like, I'm sure, fans saying thank you. We love your commentary. Like there was a dance there. There was a relationship there.
Yeah.
What is that like now in a pseudo executive role as you're growing something from the ground up?
It's unique, that's for sure. And it's one of those things where when you haven't done it before, I mean, I've done a lot of these things in my career. I've worked in TV, I've worked in radio, and I'm kind of putting them together. But we're creating, I've never created a digital platform, a streaming platform before that all these university events are going to be aired on. So it's a little bit of trial and error. I'm not going to say I'm perfect in it, but we're finding our way through it. We launched this thing about a month and a half ago, and it's been great. And the other fun part for me is this broadcast department that we're helping to grow. At some point in time, it's going to be not just athletics, but it's going to be integrated with the university. And I teach a class on campus here, an intro to sports media class. And I'm going to be lucky enough to work with the university and the communications department here to create kind of a broadcast curriculum. And then as this broadcast curriculum gets created, we can use a lot of the students that are in those disciplines, bring them within this broadcast department we're creating, and get them real world experience while they're still here on campus. So I had a great experience when I was at the University of Kansas. I had so many great professors and got to do so many things that I've wanted to do this for a long time. And so I've taught the class for a couple of years now, and now I get to integrate that with the job I'm doing. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think there's something as we all grow older of like giving back. I always tell students, I'm like, hey, email somebody that's an alum. I promise they'll get back to you because as you get older, you just want to give some sort of your expertise or knowledge or whatever back to others. So you referenced Kansas of the Big 12. Now it's Utah of the Big 12. Big win in their first game in the Big 12 at Oklahoma State a week ago. A dominant win, I think, different than what the score
It
showcased. Of
was.
course, Isaac Wilson, right? You were there. You were front row seat as always on the 50-yard line, calling it with Scott Mitchell. And I got Arizona coming to town. What can you tell us about this team that's picked to win the league? Clearly, concern with not only Cam Rising missing last week, but also other key players. Like, where do they sit in what would have been one of the top games in the Pac-12 a year ago, and his build, I think, is one of the top games in the Big 12 right now.
Well, I think last week answered some questions, Joe. Cam Rising tried to go in pregame. He wasn't quite ready. So you started true freshman on the road. No offense to Utah State, but that atmosphere last week and the team they were playing was really, really good. They were missing Kareni Reed. They were missing Connor O'Toole. They had a couple of guys step up at those positions as well. Van Fillinger's having a career year on the defensive line. But I think more than anything, what Utah did last week is what you saw for 13 years in the Pac 12. Kyle Whittingham went back to basics and he just said, we're going to punch you in the mouth. We think we're more physical than you are. And to your point, the final score wasn't indicative of really how the game went. They were up 22-3 with about 5 minutes to play. They bullied Oklahoma State around for about 55 minutes of that game in 140-degree heat on that turf. Utah got back to what its roots were. They knew they weren't 100%. They leaned on their physicality. They leaned on a running game, and that's another guy that's really emerged, Mekhi Bernard, who's been kind of I won't say a part-time back, but he's not been that lead running back one per se. Well, he carried it 25 times for 182 yards. Both were career highs. Again, against a good Oklahoma State team that was ranked 14th on the road in 140-degree heat on the turf. So I think Utah learned about their toughness, their depth, but when they want to be physical, and you know this, you've seen it for years in the Pac-12, when they want to be physical, they got back to some of that physicality last week.
Yeah, Mekhi Bernard, absolute stud. A great first name. Shout out to our youngest son. But in addition, he's also that dude, Y option, one of the players of the week a week ago. What have you noticed about Isaac Wilson? We had him at the Elite 11. It's not like there isn't competition there. I saw you last time I saw you was the spring game, called that one when he played in that ball game. He has, I'm sure, a way about him that you're watching evolve, right? Utah State, to your point, is different than Oklahoma State. Now here comes Arizona. If he's to start again this weekend, he'll have two under his belt at least against a team that is coming off a bye week, coming off a really tough loss. What have you learned about him that maybe you didn't know in the beginning of training camp?
That the stage isn't too big for him. Now he's going to make mistakes like any quarterback who's 18 years old and hasn't played a ton. But he grew. He played a little bit against Southern Utah in the first week, played the second half against Baylor when Rising got hurt, started and played 4 quarters against Utah State and played all 4 on the road at Boone Pickens last week in Stillwater. The kid's growing and he's got a confidence about him. We talked about that a lot with Cam Rising, that confidence and that swagger. You've been around and coached quarterbacks for a long time. Those guys that have it, teammates follow. Well, he's a freshman. So it's not like teammates are going to jump in and follow him immediately. You've got to kind of prove yourself a little bit, and he has. Toughness, sticking his nose in there, 48-yard run, threading that ball down to Brant Keithy for the long touchdown. He's made a few mistakes like all freshmen are going to do, but he's learned from those mistakes. And then he's come back and played. And what I've seen is a little bit of growth every game and every quarter out of him. But I'm also seeing his teammates begin to buy into him a little bit. So whether it's one more week as a starter or a couple of more weeks as a starter, whatever it might happen to be, Isaac's confidence and experience is growing. But the teammates now see it too. Because, when you step in that huddle, you want to believe in the guy that's calling that play and believe that he knows what he's going to do. Well, he's figuring out the language of Andy Ludwig's offense, which is a tad complicated for a young player. And I think he's getting his teammates, they've really begun to buy in on him.
Yeah, I can remember talking to him in the spring, and he was like, I'm just in the hip pocket of Cam. And I was like, what an experience, right? I don't think we'll ever see another seventh-year player in college football at quarterback, and he is just seemingly in his hip pocket. Even the decisions that he's making, the discernment at the position is really impressive. So let's flip it to this week. Yep. You know Brent Brennan well. You know this team well. Last year, I called this game. Of course, Cam Rising was kind of like the pseudo-assistant quarterback coach on the sideline in Tucson, and Utah gets drilled. Now we have a new head coach, similar cast of players that were making plays a year ago in that ball game. But I got to imagine that's a tough taste to navigate and deal with if you're Utah. What do you anticipate fan base on Saturday and game when you look at these two teams facing each other in weirdly the Big 12 play?
Well, I went back and I watched some of the game the other night just for reference sake, and you and Ted Robinson called that game in Tucson last year. And I know you remember the last 37 seconds of that game.
Sure
And I can
do.
tell you there's nobody in the Eccles football building that's forgotten the last 37 seconds of that game either. It was a Arizona beat them up and down the field. Utah was shorthanded. They were and Arizona beat them. But that the end of that game, I think, stuck with some of the guys. Now I know the guy that threw the pass isn't there anymore, and the coach that was high fiving and saluting the quarterback that threw the pass coming off the field isn't there anymore either. But the guy that caught it was, and a lot of the guys that were dancing and prancing and talking last year were. So I know that stuck a little bit with the guys here, but it's a different year. Utah's not worried about getting vengeance for what happened a year ago. They're worried about beating a good team on Saturday night here because if they win this game, Yogi, they are now 5-0 to start the season. They've navigated then arguably their most difficult stretch of the season, at least to this point on paper, going to Oklahoma State and coming home with Arizona. And you've beaten a really good Noah Fafita and Tetero McMillan as well. So, yeah, last year, I don't think the guys that were on the sideline have necessarily forgotten it, but you've called night games here before. It's going to be the first really good night game. Utah didn't play many night games a year ago. It's an 8:15 kickoff. It's what they call a dark mode game, so it's going to be kind of a blackout of the stadium. And there's a lot of energy in Rice-Eccles Stadium. And I think Arizona is going to get Utah's best shot coming up on Saturday night.
Yeah, I tell you what, I called the game when Arizona went to Utah with Ted 2 years ago. And late in the game, go back and watch that final 2 minutes or so, and it's Noah Fafita throws a touchdown to the left to Tetero McMillan.
Yeah.
And you just kind of saw like, I wonder if these guys will be the future. Now they come into this environment coming off a bye week. I expect them to be much improved from where they were the last time they played. But you're right. The evenings in Salt Lake City can swallow you. And we all know Morgan Scalley, and we all know the last 37 seconds to your point. I got a feeling it's going to feel like ASU top 20 matchup. You remember Jaden Daniels
Yeah.
years ago? And Arizona's going to have to navigate that early on, which leads to my next question. How good is this defense? Like, is this 2018, 2019 defense? Is this Julian Blackman, Johnson, Jalen Johnson and company? Like, where do you think this side of the ball is when healthy, notably with a couple guys out a week ago?
It's not quite there yet. They had a lot of seniors on that football team, the Blackmans and the Johnsons that you referenced. There's a couple on this team this year, but they've got impact guys. Up front, they're deep. Fillinger, as I mentioned earlier, is having a great year. Logan Fano's back, Connor O'Toole, Lander Barton's healthy. They have missed Karenni Reed a little bit, but in typical Kyle Whittingham fashion, he has found a safety and moved him to linebacker, and he kind of gives you Devin Lloyd vibes a little bit. That's Jonnu Hall, who wears number 3. The question I had about the team coming in this year was the back end. They had to replace Bishop and Vaki. They had to bring in a corner from Georgia Tech, Kenan Johnson. Well, the secondary has been terrific. The safety play with Gilman, the transfer from Stanford, and Teo Johnson have been fantastic. Kenan Johnson went down in the first game with a season-ending injury. Well, Scooby Davis, who's been in the program for a couple of years, steps up. Cam Calhoun, the Michigan transfer, who was a true freshman on that national championship team, he's come in. He's already got a pick this year, and then Zamiah Vaughn's there. So the area of the defense, I've never really worried much about the front seven because Utah at worst is good and at best they're really good. But the back end's been terrific. Now, this will be the best test of the year this weekend. Oklahoma State can throw it a little bit. They got Bowman uncomfortable last week, but Fafita and McMillan are a step up in competition, and that offense is good. So they'll be tested. But I think right now, Yogi, I'd say this defense is very good.
Okay, so let's talk about one more player on this team because it's a huge story this week around the transfer portal and players sitting out or opting out. Dorian Singer's had a very interesting dance in his college career, right? Walked on, under recruited because of COVID, balls out at Arizona, transfers to SC, doesn't live up to those expectations, which can be a challenge. And I know we both have a ton of empathy for that. And now he's at Utah facing his initial school in college football. How has he been in the transition in your eyes? And what do you anticipate from him, regardless of quarterback, come Saturday night?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I got a chance earlier this week to talk to him on the coaches show, and he's such a nice kid. So well spoken, soft spoken, just very laid back. And I asked him a little bit about it. And, he was not recruited at a high school. He walked on at Arizona. He wanted a chance to play D1 football. He walked on. He earned that scholarship, and he probably would have stayed had it not been for the coaching change and what went on there. So he goes to SC, and he kind of got caught up in numbers last year. I don't think it was any knock on Dorian Singer. SC just had a loaded wide receiver room. And I asked him, I said, "So why Utah?" And he said, "I just liked their culture. I just liked what they were about, and I felt like I could fit in here." And he has. He's already got 17 catches on the year. And I'll be honest, Yogi, and you've seen him play at Arizona. He's a receiver that can do anything. He can run any routes you want him to. He can get over the top if you need him to. He's got great hands. Everybody saw the helmet catch that he had last week against Oklahoma State. But I really do believe he gives Utah their best wide receiver one that they've had maybe since Darren Carrington was here. And then when you place him alongside guys like Micah Pittman and Money Parks and Brant Keithy and that loaded tight end room that they've got, heck, guys like Damian Alford, who was the number one receiver at Syracuse a year ago, hasn't even really gotten involved in the offense yet. But Dorian just he gives, whether it's Isaac Wilson or Cam Rising, that true wide receiver one. And I think he really likes being part of this group here in Salt Lake City.
Okay, so this entire thing that you're describing just mirrors, of course, who Kyle Whittingham is, whether it's next man up, the culture of competition, and the culture of being tough and resilient. You're 20 for him. Where's your vibe? Like, here we go. We've seen glimpses of the next couple years at quarterback in
Yeah.
Isaac Wilson. We know how talented this team is. I feel like every year it's like, yeah, this is probably going to be it. But then there's just something that lures you right back in, and it might be the shining star that Isaac Wilson may be, or the returning roster as you referenced. They're not all seniors. Any feel on Coach Witt here in another conference that he's got a chance to go win?
I think he's enjoying the ride. And people ask me that all the time. And Kyle and I have joked about it. He's always told me, "Billy, I'm not going to be a lifer. Not like my dad, not like Lavelle. I'm not going to be a lifer." But he's got a program, Yogi, that it's a well-oiled machine. Uh, five of his assistants have been with him 10 years or more. Everybody else has been there anywhere from about 4 to 10 years there too. The locker room takes care of itself. They don't have bad eggs. He's not dealing with scandals and controversies. Now he's dealing with every other coach deals with these days, transfer portal and NIL, but that's the way of the world. I really do believe that he's taking it year by year. I think that as long as he's got a chance to win a league and be competitive and he feels like he's in the mix, I think he'll seriously consider it because he loves coaching. And I asked him, he goes, "Hey, I've got a great group of coaches. I got a great group of kids." So, but to answer your question directly, he's given me no hint or indication that he's ready to step aside yet.
Yeah, I got a feeling, I've often called Utah a biker gang. Like they roll into your town, do whatever they want. They'll leave it a mess and leave however they'd like they did a week ago against OK State. I got a feeling he's just going to ride out and we'll just see the back of that Harley whenever he chooses to do it. And that will be it. So one more Utah question, and then I got a
Sure.
big picture of college football for you. What is it like in the Big 12? And I say that I work in the Big 10 now and calling games for the Big 10 Network. We're doing this thing here at Y Option, which is college football through the lens of the West Coast. It feels nationally like there are these two heavyweight leagues, which I think it's fair to assume that there are. Then you've got a really talented league in the Big 12 that, from my eyes, looks like the Pac 12 of years past, where everybody around the country probably doesn't realize how good everybody is, and they might beat each other up, and who knows who will be left standing. But I wonder, do you feel like the league that Utah's in now is not garnering a lot of respect? Because it feels like the champion will get in, but that's it. And that's just like a prevailing thought. And you're living it every day. I'm kind of curious what that experience is like for you.
Well, it's been good for Utah so far because they've kind of stepped in, by some accounts as kind of the golden child this year, picked to win the league. They've come off, back-to-back conference championships 2 years ago and things like that. I think the one thing that the Big 12 doesn't have that the SEC and Big 10 have are those they don't have a blue blood, if that makes sense. There's not a collegiate, but and they have, the SEC and the Big 10 have a bunch of them. The Big 12 really doesn't. The two blue bloods that conference had have moved on to the SEC now. But what they have is a lot of really good programs. I mean, we won't even talk about basketball. It's the best basketball conference by far. But from a football standpoint, it's what I said for a lot of years about the Pac 12. If you stay up late and watch it, it's one of the most entertaining, fun, and competitive leagues you're going to find. And I find the Big 12 to be the same thing. Now, Utah's only played the one true conference game. They did play Baylor. But I grew up in the old Big Eight. I grew up and I went to the University of Kansas. I grew up in Kansas City. So I know a lot of the kind of core schools in this league. People don't talk a lot about Iowa State. Iowa State's good. Matt Campbell can coach. They bring a toughness like Utah does. TC was in the national championship game 2 years ago. Obviously, they're down a little bit and took a beating last week. But, I'm just saying West Virginia oftentimes gets overlooked just a little bit too. Kenny Dillingham's building something at ASU. Right now, there's not a blue blood. There's not that one great historical football program. And I think a lot of times networks and fans and the national media like to turn to that. But you've seen it, and I know that the Big 12 is going to get a chance to see it. Utah and BYU, the quote unquote holy war, they're going to match up, and it may become quickly the best rivalry in the new Big 12 conference. So I think this league is really good. It's really solid. It's really competitive. I just think the one thing it lacks, if you're looking at it from a national perspective, is just that quote unquote blue blood program.
Yeah, and it's a great perspective. And I think the blue blood line is also relatively lazy from a fan perspective because you look at what Utah's done. That's why I hope they win the league and play an Arizona in the champ game or a BYU in a rematch and then go make some noise in the playoff because I think they're worthy of being in the conversation of being a blue blood just based on how they've won. I get they haven't done it for 50 years in a specific league or 100 years, but that to me is that's old news. Like college football is in the immediate dramatically different than it was 3 years ago, let alone
Well, and then
today.
you got a program like K State too.
That's right.
You know,
Yep.
when I grew up, Kansas and K State were the laughing stock of college football. People don't talk about it enough nationally, but the job that Bill Snyder did for 25 years, 30 years at Kansas State to turn them from what they were into a program now, and I think they hired a really good coach too, Yogi. I think Chris Kleiman, I mean, obviously he can coach. He won 4 national championships at the 1AA level, but he's a guy that fits their culture very, very well. That's another program that, really has emerged in the last 25 years or so because it was built on the back of a guy named Bill Snyder.
Yeah, I started my broadcasting career calling K-State games, and I still can see the bowl of Werther's Originals. Me and Sam Ponder and Steve Fiziak would be in there, and he'd offer us one quietly, so gently. And then I'd watch practice on a Friday. They'd be in full pads. And I'm like, hey, there's nothing quiet and gentle about this program. So let's talk about one more program,
Sure.
the Pac-12. The Pac-12 has come to life, right? And Utah State, as recently as was it yesterday morning or this morning? I don't remember. Like, it's all happening kind of in a blur, but they joined the Pac-12 conference now in this rebuild mode. I'm curious, 2 things. One, what can you share with our listeners and viewers about Utah State and this program moving forward into this league? And then 2, what do you think Utah's lens is on the Pac-12 and what seemingly will be one of, if not the best group of 5 conference? And we know that school, whoever wins that championship, will get an automatic bid into the CFP. And is there a world where at least you maybe went back and thought, oh, Utah, I wonder if there's another move here in the next couple of years?
With Utah, no. I think financially I'll be very curious to see what that league looks like. I
Yeah.
think it's great. I think just keeping the Pac-12 name alive is fantastic. It's going to be somewhere between a Power 4 league and a Group of 5 league.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in between there. It's not going to be your typical Group of 5, but I think it was not quite a Power 4 league. As far as Utah State goes, it's been one of those programs that traditionally through the years has just kind of been up and down and up and down. When Gary Anderson left Utah to be the head coach up there, he really revitalized that program. And then, he took off for Wisconsin. Then they hired a guy named Matt Wells, and Matt Wells did a fantastic job there as well. And he ended up leaving for Texas Tech. And the last couple of years, it's been they've been battling a little bit of turmoil up there on and off the field. A guy named Nate Dreiling is their interim head coach right now, and he's I talked to him a couple of weeks ago before Utah played them, and he's a football guy and trying to do his best. It's a tough tag to have interim head coach, and with a lot of things that are going on. But for the Aggies, I'm happy for them because it's a really good fan base. It's a loyal, hardcore fan base, and I'm happy for them to be able to get into that league. I'm very curious to see what that final iteration of the Pac-12 looks like. Is there going to be another school? What's it look like when all the dust settles here with the stuff off the field? But I'm happy for Utah State, and I hope it stabilizes just a little bit, and I hope the league is able to find some good footing and as you said, establish itself as kind of that maybe something a little bit better than a Group of Five league.
Yeah. Well, I love always the thoughtfulness. You've always had it from the moment we met 12, 13 years ago. And I look forward to seeing you sometime soon. I think it's going to have to be at like a CFP game. So Utah handle business. I'll make sure I'm tracking it. And maybe we see a Big 12 champ against a Big 10 champ. Who knows? In the playoff, we can hang out together and do another one of these catch up sessions, man.
I love it. And I'm just so happy for you and for Ashley and for the entire crew and guys like Guy Haberman and your boy Jim and and some Mike Yams doing some good stuff now too. I just, we had such a fun time and a great run. People have asked me all the time, Big 12 people are like, is Utah happy to be in the Big 12? It felt like they were trying to, I said, well, yeah, they're happy to be in the Big 12, but don't you want somebody who fights for their league and tries to keep it alive? And wouldn't you want somebody on your side that was doing their best to save something? That's what Utah was doing. Mark Harlan and the administration, the leadership, President Randall. But there just came a time where it wasn't feasible. So Utah's more than happy to be in the Big 12. But I can tell you from my standpoint and the universities and also the fans, they love their time at the Pac-12. So we'll miss that, but we had a lot of great memories, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. And I think the best part in every interview I get asked just like you do, it's always goes back to the people, right?
Yep.
We may have crossed paths at some point, but because of the Pac-12 and the growth of that league, it became, a conduit for you and I becoming fast friends. And really one of the greatest joys that I've had in my life, I've said it many times, is really connecting to your community as a broadcaster, as a human, as a dad, as a husband. Like I've had so many beautiful memories talking to fans, being on campus, going on a variety of the shows in your city. And Utah's always got a special place. I look forward. I know it'll happen. At some point, I'm going to call another game in Rice Eccles, and I can't wait to give you a big hug up in the press box, brother. So thanks again for coming on Y Option.
Thanks, Joe.
You got it. There he is, the professor, Bill Riley.